Imagine walking into a sprawling metropolis where the streets are quite literally paved with the spoils of conquered empires, where merchants casually trade in glittering jewels the size of your fist, and where the poorest citizen lives a life that would make modern billionaires completely envious. Today, we tend to think of wealth in terms of invisible digital numbers on a screen, or perhaps a fluctuating stock portfolio. But in the ancient world, wealth was physical, heavy, and blindingly beautiful. It was towering mountains of raw gold, massive fleets of wooden ships laden with fragrant spices, and colossal monuments carved from solid, gleaming marble. Welcome to Stickman History. Today, we are taking an incredible journey back through time to explore the most obscenely wealthy metropolises of the ancient world. These are the legendary places where the global economy was first born, where ruthless empires hoarded their glittering treasure, and where humanity first learned exactly how to flex its financial muscle on a grand scale. From the sun-baked, spice-scented deserts of the Middle East to the dense, emerald jungles of Mesoamerica, we are counting down the top 10 richest ancient cities ever to exist. Kicking off our epic journey at number 10 is a city that served as the beating golden heart of ancient India, the magnificent Pataliputra. Situated strategically at the confluence of the Ganges and Son rivers, this city was the capital of the mighty Mauryan Empire, and later the illustrious Gupta Empire. If you were a weary traveler arriving at the gates of Pataliputra around 300 BC, your jaw would have instantly hit the floor. The city was surrounded by a massive, awe-inspiring timber palisade, featuring 64 heavily guarded gates and 570 towering watchtowers. This wooden fortress was surrounded by a defensive moat so incredibly wide and deep that it doubled as a navigable waterway and the city's primary sewer system. But the real, unimaginable wealth lay hidden inside those wooden walls. The Mauryan emperors controlled a vast, resource-rich subcontinent, and all the taxes, tributes, and trade revenues flowed directly into Pataliputra like a river of gold. The royal palaces were legendary across the known world, built of intricately carved timber and surrounded by lush, sprawling parks filled with tame peacocks, exotic parrots, and perfectly manicured ornamental trees. Greek ambassadors who visited the city wrote back to their homeland in absolute disbelief, claiming that neither the fabled golden cities of Persia nor the grandest stone palaces of Greece could even hold a candle to the sheer, unadulterated opulence of Pataliputra. The city controlled the vital, bustling trade routes of the Ganges River, acting as the ultimate, inescapable toll booth for the highly lucrative global trade in fine silk, pungent spices, and flawless precious gems. It was a bustling metropolis, where gold was so abundant it was routinely woven into the everyday clothing of the elite classes, setting a standard for jaw-dropping luxury that would echo through Indian history for millennia. Moving across the globe to the sun-drenched shores of North Africa, we find our number 9, the great, terrifying maritime superpower of Carthage. Long before Rome became the undisputed master of the Mediterranean, Carthage was the wealthiest and most technologically advanced city in the Western world. Founded by clever Phoenician colonists, Carthage did not build its immense wealth through massive land conquests or vast standing armies, but through absolute, ruthless, and highly organized domination of the sea. They were the ultimate merchant princes of antiquity. The secret to their incredible, world-shaking wealth was a strict monopoly on luxury trade, specifically the production and distribution of Tyrian purple dye. This incredibly vibrant dye, extracted painstakingly, drop by drop, from the glands of thousands of rotting sea snails, was so ridiculously expensive and highly sought after that it was worth significantly more than its weight in pure gold, and Carthage completely controlled its distribution to the royalty of the ancient world. But that was just the beginning of their vast portfolio. The Carthaginians mined literal mountains of silver in the Iberian Peninsula and traded highly valuable tin from as far away as the misty shores of Britain. The city itself was a marvelous wonder of engineering and concentrated wealth, featuring a massive, perfectly circular artificial harbor known as the Kothon. This engineering marvel could hold hundreds of advanced warships and massive merchant vessels simultaneously. The inner harbor was a restricted, top-secret military zone, heavily guarded and packed with the absolute finest naval technology money could buy. Wealthy Carthaginians lived in sprawling, multi-story apartment buildings equipped with indoor plumbing and cisterns, surrounded by bustling markets overflowing with exotic goods from the very edges of the known world. They were so unbelievably rich that they rarely fought their own battles, preferring instead to use their bottomless treasury to hire massive, highly trained armies of mercenaries to fight and die for them. It was this exact overflowing wealth that eventually made them the prime, irresistible target of a young, highly ambitious, and deeply militaristic city called Rome, leading to a brutal clash that would end with Carthage being burned to the ground and its immense, legendary riches plundered to fund the rise of a new empire. At number 8, we travel far to the east, arriving at the bustling eastern terminus of the legendary Silk Road, the magnificent, sprawling city of Chang'an. During the height of the Tang dynasty, around the 8th century AD, Chang'an was arguably the largest, most populous, and wealthiest city on the entire planet. Imagine a city laid out in a perfect, mathematically precise grid, surrounded by massive, impenetrable, fortified walls that stretched for miles in every direction, housing a staggering population of over 1 million people, at a time when major European capitals like London and Paris were little more than muddy, impoverished villages. Chang'an was the ultimate cosmopolitan hub, a melting pot of global cultures and staggering riches. It was the final, highly anticipated destination for every weary merchant traveling the treacherous Silk Road, bringing a relentless, glittering river of wealth directly into the city's massive markets. Here, you could easily find wealthy Persian traders, ascetic Indian monks, and exotic Arabian envoys rubbing shoulders and exchanging heavy coins in the bustling Western market. The wealth of Chang'an was so vast that it was often measured not just in precious metals, but in high-quality silk, which was used as a literal physical currency for major transactions. The heavily guarded imperial treasuries were filled to the absolute brim with millions of bolts of the finest, most intricately woven silk, sitting alongside literal mountains of silver bullion, flawlessly carved jade, and incredibly expensive exotic spices. The emperor's primary residence, the Daming Palace, was a complex of truly staggering, mind-bending proportions, covering an area 4.5 times the size of the famous Forbidden City in Beijing. It was a place of endless, lavish banquets where sweet wine flowed freely from cleverly engineered mechanical fountains, and thousands of beautiful concubines wore flowing robes heavily embroidered with pure gold thread. The immense, seemingly inexhaustible wealth of Chang'an funded a brilliant golden age of art, poetry, and technological innovation, making it a shining beacon of advanced civilization that radiated its golden, wealthy glow across the entire Asian continent and beyond. For number 7, we journey into the harsh, unforgiving, and deeply arid deserts of the Middle East, to find a city that literally carved its immense wealth directly into the living rock, the breathtaking rose-red city of Petra. Serving as the heavily fortified capital of the Nabatean kingdom, Petra was a stunning miracle of ancient engineering, hydrology, and brilliant economics. How exactly does a city completely isolated in the middle of an arid, blistering desert become one of the wealthiest and most luxurious places on planet Earth? The answer is a brilliant combination of water monopoly and the highly lucrative incense trade. The Nabateans were absolute masters of desert hydrology, painstakingly carving intricate, sprawling networks of stone dams, hidden cisterns, and terracotta channels to capture, store, and distribute every single drop of precious flash flood water. Because they completely controlled the only reliable water supply in the region, they absolutely controlled the incredibly profitable trade routes. Petra sat perfectly and strategically at the exact crossroads of the great ancient caravan routes connecting the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and the wealthy Levant. If you were a merchant who wanted to safely transport highly valuable frankincense and myrrh from the southern tip of Arabia to the incredibly wealthy, demanding markets of Rome and Greece, you absolutely had to pass through the narrow canyons of Petra, and the Nabateans charged a very hefty, unavoidable toll for safe passage and water. These aromatic spices were absolutely essential for religious rituals, burials, and luxury perfumes across the entire ancient world, making them incredibly valuable and constantly in demand. The massive, continuous wealth generated from this monopoly allowed the Nabateans to carve a breathtaking, monumental metropolis directly into the sheer, towering sandstone cliffs. The iconic, world-famous treasury, with its elaborate, deeply carved Hellenistic facade, was just one of hundreds of magnificent tower tombs, sprawling temples, and massive civic monuments that showcased their immense, heavily guarded riches. Petra was a glittering, unexpected oasis of extreme luxury, where weary, dust-covered merchants could rest in lavish, heavily irrigated gardens and bathe in cool pools fed by ancient, brilliant plumbing, all funded entirely by the sweet-smelling smoke of burning incense and the heavy toll of silver coins. Coming in hot at number 6 is a city that completely and utterly shattered the expectations of the battle-hardened European explorers who first laid eyes on it, the magnificent, floating Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. Built brilliantly on a series of artificial islands in the middle of the expansive Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan was a breathtaking masterpiece of urban planning, hydraulic engineering, and a towering testament to the staggering, centralized wealth of the mighty Aztec Empire. When the Spanish conquistadors first arrived in the early 16th century, they genuinely thought they were dreaming or reading a fantastical romance novel. They saw a massive, gleaming city of pristine white step pyramids, vast, impeccably clean plazas, and a highly complex network of navigable canals that easily rivaled the beauty and functionality of Venice. But the true, undeniable measure of Tenochtitlan's immense wealth was its massive central market located in the bustling sister city of Tlatelolco. It was an economic engine completely unlike anything ever seen in the Americas, where up to 60,000 people gathered daily to trade in a highly organized, heavily policed environment. The Aztecs did not use traditional metal coins. Instead, their vast wealth was measured in highly prized cacao beans, tightly woven cotton cloaks, and transparent quills filled to the brim with glittering gold dust. The powerful Emperor Moctezuma received a constant, heavy stream of tribute from hundreds of thoroughly conquered and subjugated states across Mesoamerica. This mandatory tribute included massive mountains of maize and beans, thousands of brightly colored, incredibly rare tropical bird feathers, fierce jaguar skins, and unimaginable heavy quantities of raw gold, silver, and flawlessly carved green jade. The elite classes of the city adorned themselves with heavy, intricately crafted gold jewelry and massive headdresses made of shimmering, iridescent quetzal feathers, which were actually considered significantly more valuable and sacred than gold itself. The emperor's sprawling palace featured beautiful, highly curated botanical gardens, a massive, noisy zoo filled with exotic predators, and secure treasure rooms filled entirely from floor to ceiling with precious metals and glowing stones. Tenochtitlan was a city built on brutal military might and highly efficient economic extortion, a glittering, wealthy jewel sitting peacefully on a high-altitude lake that represented the absolute pinnacle of wealth and power in the pre-Columbian Americas. Halfway through our countdown at number 5, we find the undisputed crown jewel of ancient Mesopotamia, the legendary, infamous city of Babylon. Situated perfectly on the fertile, muddy banks of the life-giving Euphrates River, Babylon was globally synonymous with extravagant, almost sinful wealth and monumental, awe-inspiring architecture. Under the iron-fisted rule of King Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BC, Babylon became the undisputed, glittering center of the known world. The city's immense wealth was built primarily on the incredibly fertile, heavily irrigated soils of Mesopotamia, which consistently produced massive, reliable agricultural surpluses of grain and dates. This agricultural foundation was combined with a highly strategic geographic location that allowed Babylon to completely dominate the lucrative trade routes flowing between the wealthy Persian Gulf and the bustling Mediterranean Sea. The sheer, terrifying scale of Babylon's wealth was clearly reflected in its massive defensive walls, which were famously said to be so incredibly thick that a four-horse chariot could easily turn around on top of them without falling off. The city was entered through the magnificent, towering Ishtar Gate, which was entirely covered in brilliant lapis lazuli blue glazed bricks and heavily adorned with striking golden reliefs of fierce dragons and charging bulls. Inside these impenetrable walls, the city boasted the towering, terrifyingly massive Etemenanke Ziggurat, a structure so huge it likely inspired the famous biblical story of the Tower of Babel. Nearby sat the fabled lush hanging gardens, a brilliant feat of hydraulic engineering and one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, built purely to satisfy the homesickness of a wealthy queen. The heavily guarded royal treasury was constantly overflowing with raw gold, refined silver, and countless precious stones looted mercilessly from conquered nations across the Middle East. Babylon was a city of endless, unapologetic indulgence, where the wealthy elite wore fine garments heavily fringed with solid gold beads and threw massive, raucous banquets that lasted for days on end, consuming vast, expensive quantities of imported wine and exotic, highly spiced meats. It was a city that became a lasting, powerful symbol of wealth and decadence, so profound that its very name is still used today to describe a place of ultimate, corrupting luxury and unchecked financial excess. At number 4, we travel to the breezy, sunlit Mediterranean coast of Egypt to explore a city brilliantly built by a legendary conqueror and deeply enriched by the collected intellect of the ancient world, the great city of Alexandria. Founded by the undefeated Alexander the Great, this perfectly planned city quickly became the wealthy capital of the powerful Ptolemaic kingdom and rapidly rose to become an absolute economic and cultural superpower. Alexandria's immense, world-shaping wealth was heavily based on 2 massive pillars. First, it was the undisputed breadbasket of the entire Mediterranean region. The incredibly fertile, annually flooded lands of the Nile Delta produced mind-boggling, seemingly endless quantities of high-quality wheat and grain. And Alexandria strictly controlled every single ounce of its highly profitable export. If you wanted to feed a growing, hungry empire or a massive standing army, you absolutely had to buy your grain from the merchants of Alexandria. This near-total monopoly brought a massive, unstoppable river of gold and silver directly into the city's deep coffers. Second, Alexandria was the undisputed intellectual and scientific capital of the world. It housed the legendary Great Library, which ambitiously aimed to collect, translate, and store all human knowledge, and the Museum, a heavily funded research institute that attracted the absolute greatest mathematical and scientific minds of antiquity. This incredible intellectual wealth directly translated into massive technological and economic dominance. The city's bustling, massive harbor was dominated by the awe-inspiring Pharos Lighthouse, a towering, heavily engineered structure of gleaming white marble that stood over 300 feet tall, burning a massive fire that guided wealthy merchant ships safely into port day and night. The sprawling royal palaces of the wealthy Ptolemies occupied almost a third of the entire city, creating a massive, restricted complex of lush gardens, marble pavilions, and heavily guarded treasuries filled to the ceiling with gold bullion, carved ivory, and exotic animals brought from deep within Africa. Cleopatra, the incredibly wealthy and brilliant last ruler of the dynasty, famously demonstrated the city's unbelievable wealth by casually dissolving a priceless, massive pearl in a cup of highly acidic vinegar and drinking it, simply to win a petty bet with the Roman general Mark Antony about who could host the most expensive, lavish dinner in history. Alexandria was a glittering, wealthy city where immense, unmatched financial power met unparalleled, world-changing intellectual brilliance. Breaking into our highly competitive top three, we arrive at the famous birthplace of democracy and the undisputed cultural powerhouse of the ancient world, the magnificent city of Athens. During its legendary Golden Age in the 5th century BC, Athens was not just a peaceful city of robed philosophers and tragic playwrights. It was an incredibly wealthy, highly aggressive imperial power with a bottomless bank account. The heavy, solid foundation of Athenian wealth came directly from the earth. The nearby, highly productive silver mines of Laurion were brutally worked by thousands of enslaved people day and night, producing vast, heavy quantities of pure silver that the Athenians used to mint their famous, highly trusted owl coins. These heavy silver coins quickly became the absolute standard currency of the entire Mediterranean, universally accepted and highly prized by merchants from Spain to Persia. But the real, terrifying explosion of Athenian wealth came from the creation of the Delian League. Originally formed as a mutual defense alliance to fight off the invading Persians, Athens quickly and ruthlessly turned the League into its own personal empire, forcing its supposed allies to pay a massive, mandatory annual tribute in pure silver just for Athenian protection. The brilliant statesman Pericles decided to use this staggering, highly controversial influx of imperial cash to heavily fund the most ambitious, expensive public works program in Greek history. The glorious result was the complete transformation of the Acropolis, crowned by the breathtaking, mathematically perfect Parthenon. This magnificent marble temple was not just a beautiful religious building, it was a literal, heavily guarded bank vault. The colossal, towering statue of the goddess Athena inside was made entirely of solid, gleaming gold and carved ivory, and its heavy gold plates were specifically designed so they could be carefully removed and melted down to fund the city's armies in times of severe financial crisis. Athens was a bustling, noisy city where the immense wealth of an entire maritime empire was heavily concentrated into a single, shining metropolis, funding a massive cultural explosion of art, monumental architecture, and deep philosophy that would heavily shape the course of Western civilization forever. Just narrowly missing the top spot at number 2 is the terrifyingly powerful city that systematically conquered the known world and ruthlessly funneled its unimaginable riches back to the muddy banks of the Tiber River, the eternal, massive city of Rome. At its absolute imperial peak, Rome was a sprawling, chaotic city of well over 1 million people, and it was entirely and completely sustained by the staggering wealth extracted from its massive, globe-spanning empire. Rome did not just produce wealth through trade, it aggressively extracted it from everywhere else through the point of a sword. Every single time the highly disciplined Roman legions conquered a new, wealthy territory, they brought back unimaginable, heavy cartloads of plunder. Raw gold from the rivers of Gaul, massive shipments of silver from the deep mines of Spain, endless fleets of grain from conquered Egypt, and millions of enslaved people from every corner of the globe all flowed directly into the hungry maw of Rome. The sheer, overwhelming volume of wealth concentrated in the city is almost impossible for the modern mind to fully comprehend. Wealthy emperors used this seemingly bottomless, blood-soaked treasury to build massive, heavy infrastructure on a literal, godlike scale. They constructed massive, tower stone aqueducts that reliably brought hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh, clean water into the city every single day, funding elaborate, sprawling public bathhouses, heavily decorated with expensive imported marble, glittering gold mosaics, and complex underfloor heating systems. They built the massive, awe-inspiring Colosseum, a towering arena funded entirely by the looted gold and silver spoils of the Jewish War, where the demanding public was kept happy with lavish, incredibly expensive, and bloody spectacles featuring exotic animals shipped from the edges of the earth. The incredibly wealthy patricians of Rome lived in sprawling, palatial villas on the exclusive Palatine Hill, throwing incredibly lavish dinner parties where elite guests casually dined on imported flamingo tongues, roasted ostriches, and dormice heavily dipped in expensive honey. Rome was the ultimate unstoppable consumer city, a massive, wealthy black hole that aggressively sucked in the natural resources and treasures of 3 separate continents. It was a chaotic, glittering place where massive fortunes were ruthlessly made and violently lost in a single day, and where the sheer, unprecedented concentration of money created a lifestyle of extreme luxury that would not be seen again on Earth for over 1,000 years. And finally, arriving at our number 1 spot, the absolute richest, most heavily fortified, and most dazzlingly wealthy city of the ancient and medieval world, the impregnable fortress of Constantinople. When the western half of the massive Roman Empire finally collapsed into chaotic ruin and bitter poverty, the eastern half, heavily centered on the glittering city of Constantinople, simply shrugged and kept getting richer by the day. Founded by the visionary Emperor Constantine the Great on the ancient site of Byzantium, the city's geographic location was an absolute, unmatched geopolitical masterstroke. It sat perfectly and securely on the narrow Bosphorus Strait, completely controlling the only navigable maritime choke point between the wealthy Black Sea and the bustling Mediterranean, while simultaneously acting as the primary, highly trafficked land bridge between the continents of Europe and Asia. Every single ounce of fine silk traveling from China, every heavy sack of pungent spices shipped from India, and every single enslaved person brought from the cold north absolutely had to pass through the massive gates of Constantinople, and the highly organized Byzantine emperors heavily taxed every single item. The staggering wealth of the city was globally legendary and deeply envied. The massive, heavily guarded imperial treasury held millions upon millions of solidi, the pure, heavy gold coins that reliably served as the absolute standard currency of all international trade for over 7 centuries. The city's glittering skyline was completely dominated by the massive dome of the Hagia Sophia, a towering cathedral so unbelievably massive and so lavishly decorated with acres of gold mosaics and extremely rare, precious marbles that when the wealthy Emperor Justinian first entered it upon its completion, he threw his hands up and reportedly claimed he had finally outdone the legendary wealth of King Solomon himself. The sprawling imperial palace was a massive, restricted complex of unparalleled, mind-boggling luxury, famously featuring heavy mechanical golden lions that actually roared and mechanical golden birds that flapped their wings and sang, all designed specifically to deeply intimidate and awe visiting foreign ambassadors with the sheer, crushing weight of Byzantine wealth. Furthermore, the city's monopoly on the highly secretive silk production industry, achieved by famously smuggling live silkworms out of China inside hollowed-out walking sticks, brought an endless river of foreign gold into the city's markets. The entire massive metropolis was fiercely protected by the legendary Theodosian walls, a massive, heavily engineered triple line of stone fortifications that successfully ensured the city's unimaginable, towering wealth remained completely safe from envious barbarian hordes and rival empires for over 1,000 years. Constantinople was the ultimate, glittering fortress of wealth, an impregnable diamond of advanced civilization that safely preserved the immense riches and deep knowledge of antiquity, while the rest of Europe plunged headfirst into the impoverished Dark Ages, easily making it the richest ancient city to ever exist. And there you have it, the top 10 richest, most opulent ancient cities that ever existed on the face of the earth. These massive, glittering metropolises were the roaring engines of early human progress. Incredible places where the aggressive accumulation of immense, heavy wealth allowed humanity to build much higher, think much deeper, and live far more extravagantly than ever before in history. They serve as a powerful reminder that while the mighty empires of the past may have eventually crumbled to dust and faded into myth, the heavy, golden legacy of their incredible wealth still echoes loudly in the massive stone ruins they left behind and the complex history they violently forged. From the heavy, golden temples of democratic Athens to the bustling, floating markets of Tenochtitlan, these magnificent cities conclusively proved that money, trade, and treasure have absolutely always made the world go round. If you thoroughly enjoyed this immersive journey through the deeply opulent and wealthy past, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Stickman History, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on our exciting animated adventures through the fascinating annals of time. Leave a comment down below telling us which of these incredibly wealthy ancient cities you would have loved to visit the most, or which one you think had the absolute most impressive hoard of glittering treasure. Until next time, keep exploring the past, because history is absolutely always much richer and much more expensive than you think.
If you liked this video, please hit the like and subscribe button for more.